I opened my eyes to find a naked woman in my arms, and I immediately raised my hand to hit her. My slap froze midair, I remembered. In my previous life, I listened to my stepfather's instigation, beat her half to death, ruined her reputation, and then walked off to join the army. When I came back 5 years later, she had already frozen to death in the thatched hut, leaving behind only a sweater she had knitted for me. My later wife ran off with all my money, and I died in a suburban hospital. Now I've been reborn, and outside the door my stepfather is shouting that she slept around. I put on my clothes and pushed the door open. Old bastard, who were you cursing just now? In the winter of 1981, I was awakened by the cold. It was the kind of cold that drilled into the cracks of your bones. My whole body felt like it was soaked in ice water, with only a slight warmth in my chest. I opened my eyes to a blackened thatched roof, mildewed wooden plank walls, and the pungent smell of firewood. I had been reborn. Back to this thatched hut, back to 1981, back to when she was still here. Looking down, I saw a thin, frail body holding me tightly, using her own body to keep me warm. Zhao Huilan, the woman I despised, beat, and cursed, and finally abandoned. The woman who waited for me in the thatched hut for 5 years, until she was crushed to death by the heavy snow. In my previous life, I was a complete bastard. In the winter of 1981, the village was implementing the household responsibility system. In order to get a larger share of land, my stepfather Li Xinding made me marry Zhao Huilan, the last educated young woman in the village who hadn't returned to the city, and she was also lame. On our wedding day, he drove us into this thatched hut used for storing firewood. There was only one tattered quilt and 2 bundles of straw. Overwhelmed by rage, hunger, and cold, I fell ill, burning with a fever that wouldn't break. It was she, this woman I despised, who stripped off her clothes and held me, forcibly dragging me back from death's door. But how did I treat her? I beat her, cursed her, and took out all my resentment toward my stepfather on her. Those bruises on her body were all from my beatings. Zhao Huilan woke up. When she saw that my eyes were open, she shrank back like a startled rabbit, her rough, chapped face filled with fear. Why, you're awake? I'll go get you something to eat right away. She hurriedly put on that patch-covered piece of clothing. Her hands were very rough, covered in chilblains. Watching her limping figure walk toward the fire, I slapped myself hard across the face. In my previous life, Li Xinding had outwardly agreed to let me marry Zhao Huilan, on the condition that the village give 1 job slot at a firecracker factory. He wanted that slot for his eldest daughter, but the village cadres said the slot had to go to Zhao Huilan, as consideration for a disabled person. Li Xinding didn't dare refuse to their faces, but the moment he turned around, he drove us into the thatched hut, hoping we'd freeze or starve to death so the slot would naturally fall into his hands. What he didn't count on was that Zhao Huilan actually went down on her knees throughout the whole village, kowtowing to beg for a few mouthfuls of grain, and we survived. Li Xinding panicked and came up with another vicious scheme to ruin her reputation, saying that she was sleeping around with men just for a bite to eat. Once her name was ruined, the firecracker factory wouldn't want her anymore. In my previous life, I actually believed it. I beat her half to death and personally made those filthy accusations seem true. Then I ran off to join the army, not daring to face it for 5 years. When I returned 5 years later, all I saw was an earthen grave and a sweater she had knitted for me. That sweater was made stitch by stitch from money she earned by limping up cliffs to gather medicinal herbs and walking more than a dozen miles of mountain roads to the town to exchange them for cash. I knelt in front of her grave and slapped myself until my mouth was full of blood. But she could never come back. Later, I stayed in the military for 12 years and became part of the first group of modern special forces soldiers after the founding of the country. After retiring from the army, I went into business, caught the wave of the times, and became the richest man in Jiangqing. I married a young and beautiful woman, thinking I'd found happiness. And what happened? Only when I was critically ill did I find out that she had long been colluding with someone else to swallow up all my property. I died on a bed in a small suburban hospital. The only thing by my side was that sweater. Thankfully, heaven gave me another chance. This time, I will never act like a fool again. I'm going to protect her, make sure she's fed and warmly clothed, and make her a woman everyone envies. Smack! Zhao Huilan turned at the sound of the slap. When she saw my red-rimmed eyes, she was so frightened that her face went deathly pale and her whole body trembled. Don't hit me. I slapped myself again, jumped off the bed, and pulled her tightly into my arms. I'm sorry, truly sorry. In this life, I'll fight with everything I have to make you happy. I will never let you suffer even the slightest grievance again. She was stunned, her body stiff as a rock. She thought my fever still hadn't gone down and that I was talking nonsense. She struggled to say, "The water's boiling. I'll go make something for you to eat." I noticed she was trembling the whole time and was secretly crying too. I quickly let go of her, but she immediately shrank to the other side of the fire. She poured cornmeal from a broken clay jar into the pot to cook. There was only a tiny handful in total, not even enough for one mouthful. My heart ached, and I grabbed my clothes and put them on. "Wait at home. I'm going out to find something to eat." The heavy snow had sealed off the mountain, and no household had any surplus grain. I couldn't borrow any. But when I saw the bamboo-woven sieve by the door, I got an idea. First, I'll catch a few birds and recover some strength. Carrying the sieve and a rope, I walked to the bamboo grove behind the mountain, already covered in cold sweat. Forcing myself to hold on, I set up the sieve and scattered some rotten leaves as bait, then lay in the snow not far away and waited. 2 sparrows went in. Just as I was about to pull the rope, 2 brightly feathered birds suddenly flew over nearby. Pheasants, at least over a pound each. They hesitated for a moment, but still went in. I yanked the rope hard, and the sieve dropped over them. But that thing was too light. With one flap, the pheasants were about to lift it up. I rushed over in 2 seconds and threw my whole body on top of it. My vision went black and I was gasping for air, but my face was full of smiles. With these 2 pheasants, Huilan wouldn't come down with that serious illness. When I got back to the thatched hut, Zhao Huilan had fallen asleep again. She hadn't dared touch a single bite of that pot of corn porridge that was little more than plain water. I quietly began to clean the pheasants. There were no decent cooking utensils, just a broken kitchen knife. I decided to make beggar's chicken. Mix mud, pluck the feathers, gut it, rub it with salt, wrap it in mud, and bury it in the fire. I only made one. The other had another use. "Huilan, I'll be back soon. Don't touch the chicken when it's done. Wait for me to come back." Carrying the other pheasant, I knocked on the yacht-sized door. In my previous life, it was Uncle Yukai who told me the truth and tried to scold me awake. He was one of the few kind-hearted people in the village. "Uncle Yukai, I'll trade you this pheasant for 2 sets of old cotton-padded jackets and pants, all right?" He stared at the pheasant, his eyes going wide. In all his life, he had never seen anyone catch a pheasant with a mountain sealed by heavy snow. "All right, kid's mom, take out those 2 sets of old cotton-padded clothes and give them to Dashan." By the time I got home with the padded clothes, the beggar's chicken was already giving off a delicious aroma. I cracked open the mud shell, and the fragrance burst out. Zhao Huilan swallowed hard. I tore off 2 drumsticks and handed them to her. "Here, eat while it's hot. Slowly, don't burn yourself." She hesitated, then took a bite. And then the tears wouldn't stop. She ate in big mouthfuls while crying. This pheasant, seasoned with nothing more than a bit of coarse salt, and actually quite tough when cooked, tasted to her like the finest delicacy in the world. My heart ached. "Eat slowly, there's more. From now on, I'll let you eat meat every day." She looked up at me, and the fear in her eyes was gradually replaced by a bit of reassurance. "You eat too." "Okay." A pheasant weighing less than 2 jin doesn't have much meat after removing the feathers and innards. I gave most of it to her. Just after we finished eating, cursing suddenly came from outside the door. "Zhao Huilan, you shameless slut. Sleeping with a man for a bite to eat. Get your ass out here." Li Xinding. He had come because he smelled the meat. He didn't care whether we ate meat or not. What he cared about was that we hadn't died. If we don't die, what will happen to the quota for the firecracker factory? My gaze instantly turned icy. In my previous life, he had also shouted like this and slung mud at us. That very night, Zhao Huilan hanged herself with a dead vine. Although she didn't die, her lame leg was broken again in the fall. Later, an old Chinese medicine doctor told me that her limp was only a congenital hip dislocation and could have been completely cured. But that fall destroyed all hope. This time, it must never happen again. Don't be afraid. With me here, no one will bully you. After saying this to the cowering Zhao Huilan, I turned and pulled open the wooden door. "Shut up." I roared angrily at Li Xinding. "I know exactly what you're plotting. If you dare keep spouting filth and ruining my wife's reputation, don't blame me for being rude." Li Xinding was stunned. In his eyes, I was just a coward who had been beaten and cursed by him since childhood and never dared make a sound. Ever since I was 3 and followed my remarried mother into his household, I had worked from dawn to dusk, and if I slackened even a little, I'd be viciously beaten. During those famine years, he wouldn't even give my sister and me food, and would snatch away most of the wild vegetables too. I had never dared speak loudly, and now I had cursed at him. "You little bastard, you dare curse me?" He grabbed a firewood stick and swung it at me. I shifted slightly to dodge, and his foot slipped, sending him sprawling flat on his face. Ah, my son is beating his father, repaying kindness with enmity. Everyone, come and look. This little bastard's wife is cheating on him, and he's protecting her, even beating his own father. I can't go on living. He rolled around on the ground, making a scene, and the commotion grew louder and louder. The villagers had already been staying indoors for the winter, so a crowd quickly gathered around. Li Xinding became even more worked up. Everyone, stand up for me. I kindly tried to discipline that shameless woman for him, and he actually hit me instead. I've worked so hard to raise him as his stepfather, and this is what I get. Several older women started pointing and gossiping. Who would have thought he'd do something so immoral and disgraceful? Shameless. Good thing she came to my house yesterday when I wasn't home, or else my man might have. Zhao Huilan stumbled out the door, tripped her lame leg on the threshold, and pitched headfirst toward the frozen steps. I caught her in one swift motion. Looking at her panicked face, I said softly, "You don't need to come out. It's cold outside. Leave it to me." She looked up at me, surprise in her eyes, confusion, and a tiny bit of trust. Is he really protecting me? And even caring about me? Among the watching villagers, an old man, surnamed Zhang, hobbled over to the two of them with his cane and scolded Chen Dashan. "Dashan, what your wife did. Back in the old days, she would have been seized, paraded through the streets, and dunked in a pig cage. Xinding, as your father, was only helping you teach her a lesson. How could you lay a hand on him? Aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning for a son beating his father? Kneel down right now and kowtow to your father to apologize. Then give your wife a proper beating too. When something like this happens in your family, it's our whole village that loses face. If you still dare talk back, then don't blame us men, young and old, for getting rough with you." Before the man had even finished speaking, the surrounding villagers had already begun echoing him, moving several steps closer to Chen Dashan and Zhao Huilan in unison, looking as if they were about to attack the two of them at any moment. Seeing this scene, Zhao Huilan instantly felt icy cold all over, and tears came streaming down in a flash. She knew all too well just how cowardly Chen Dashan used to be. The few tough words he had just said in front of Li Xinding were already nothing short of unprecedented. He looks down on me that much, so how could he possibly, for a lame woman like me, go against respected elder Zhang and offend so many fellow villagers? And just as Zhao Huilan was sinking into utter despair, Chen Dashan's hand steadied her tottering body. The man's icy gaze went straight to elder Zhang, giving him no face at all. "Old fool, since you've gone senile, then shut your mouth for me. Which eye of yours saw my wife having an affair outside? And which eye of yours saw me hit Li Xinding?" Zhao Huilan's eyes suddenly widened, and she turned to look at Chen Dashan in a daze. At last, a tiny glimmer of light appeared in her dim, reddened eyes. The surrounding villagers' expressions froze, all staring at the man whose back was as straight as a javelin in utter disbelief. Is this still the Chen Dashan we know? He actually dared to speak to Elder Zhang in that tone? Chen Dashan ignored Elder Zhang, who was red in the face and neck from anger, and instead directly raised his eyes to meet the crowd's gazes. "Menfolk, aunties and grannies, you should all know as clear as day how Li Xinding has mistreated me and my sister all these years, right?" As he spoke, he raised his hand again and pointed toward the thatched hut. "Look, just look again at how he split up the family. He left us absolutely no way to survive." Yes, I nodded and agreed to this family division myself, so I can't blame anyone else. Chen Dashan's tone carried a bit of helplessness, yet also revealed a streak of resolve. But as for him, he only pushed his luck further, coming right to our door to slander my wife, making up baseless lies to ruin her reputation. Isn't that forcing us onto a dead end? Thinking of everything from his previous life, Chen Dashan's eyes reddened slightly, and his emotions grew more and more agitated. Let me ask everyone here, what man could swallow this insult? He gently wrapped an arm around Zhao Huilan's frail shoulders, his movements tender yet firm. When the family was divided, Li Xinding didn't leave me even a tiny bit of grain. The little grain we've eaten these past few days was all begged for by my wife, kneeling in the ice and snow, kowtowing from house to house. Chen Dashan's voice echoed through the silent village, carrying far into the distance. My life was snatched back from the king of hell by my wife. If anyone still dares to gossip behind our backs from now on, or slander my wife, then don't blame me for turning ruthless and fighting him to the death." Zhao Huilan's body shook violently, and she turned to look at the man beside her with a face full of disbelief. "He's actually protecting me like this? Is this still the Chen Dashan I know? How did one illness make him seem like a completely different person? Could I be dreaming?" When the villagers had just seen Zhao Huilan come out of the thatched hut, They hadn't paid much attention to the situation inside. It was only now that they followed Chen Dashan's pointing finger and saw the battered wooden plank bed inside, along with the bit of straw spread on it and the tattered cotton wadding that was practically falling apart. Everyone was stunned at once, and the expressions on their faces changed from surprise to anger. Aunt Wang, the village's famous blabbermouth, was the first to speak. This Li Xinding really is a piece of trash. Even if Dashan is a stepson, he still called you dad for more than 10 years. How can you be so heartless? In this freezing weather, you drove Dashan and his wife into this dilapidated shack that lets in wind from all sides. Aren't you trying to kill them? Old man Lu also tapped his pipe and shook his head as he said, Dashan is right. This stepfather Li Xinding really hasn't stopped tormenting the brother and sister over the years. I've passed by their house several times and saw him beating the children at home, and he was really vicious. Hearing these words, Li Xinding was like a cat with its tail stepped on, and suddenly jumped up. All of you shut up. This is our old Li family's business. It's not your place, outsiders, to point fingers. As for dividing the family, this little bastard agreed to it himself. Even if the Jade Emperor came, don't think about going back on it. He's a grown man with 2 working hands and feet. If he can't survive, who can he blame? He can only blame himself for being useless. I'm just a stepfather. I've raised him for over 10 years, and I've already done more than enough. Am I supposed to support him for the rest of his life? I never said I would redivide the family. Chen Dashan cut Li Xinding off and said coldly, What I'm talking about now is you slandering my wife. You don't think I really don't know, do you? When you divided the family, you pushed us to the brink, and now you've come to ruin my wife's reputation, all for the sake of taking the job slot the village gave my wife at the firecracker factory, and getting it for your eldest daughter, Li Chunmei. Chen Dashan didn't beat around the bush. Right in front of everyone, he directly exposed what Li Xinding was really after. Hearing this, Li Xinding instantly froze as if under a spell, standing there dumbfounded. The people from the village committee only told me in private, and this little bastard hasn't even gone out lately. How would he know about this? The villagers nearby exploded the moment they heard the news. Aunt Wang rushed in front of Li Xinding like a gust of wind, her finger nearly poking his face as she cursed. Li Xinding, you old bastard, you're truly worse than an animal. Just so your Chunmei can get an iron rice bowl, you're driving Dashan and his wife to their deaths. Aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning? Aunt Wang's combat power was famous throughout the village. Li Xinding didn't dare answer her at all. In a fit of shame and rage, he waved the firewood stick in his hand and charged at Chen Dashan. I'll beat you to death, you lying little bastard. My Chunmei was clearly chosen by the firecracker factory because she met all the requirements. That's a state-run factory. The workers all have iron rice bowls and draw state salaries. So how could they possibly give the slot to a cripple? I'll beat you to death. Today I am absolutely going to beat you, you lightning-struck little bastard, to death. He was being completely unreasonable now, throwing a full tantrum. Seeing Li Xinding's stick smash down again, Chen Dashan held Zhao Huilan in his arms and naturally had no intention of dodging even half a step. Thud! Li Xinding was sent straight down into the snow with a kick from Chen Dashan. Either you tell the truth in front of everyone here and clear my wife's name, or we go together to the village committee. No, straight to the police, to have them witness a new division of the family, and have them help investigate everything clearly and give my wife justice. Making things up and ruining someone's reputation constitutes the crimes of insult and defamation. When that time comes, you'll be arrested and sent to prison. Crime? Prison? The howling Li Xinding instantly fell silent, his face turning pale as he stiffened his neck and shouted, Stop trying to scare me here. I only said a few words. What law did I break? If anyone's getting arrested, it should be you first. If saying a few words is against the law, then a son hitting his father ought to be executed. Chen Dashan stood up directly, looking as if he was ready to leave at once. Fine. Then I'll go report it to the public security right now and let you see whether I'm bluffing or not. Li Xinding's face went even paler, and he subconsciously reached out, wanting to grab him. Just then, a shrill scream full of viciousness suddenly came from nearby. You bastard! How dare you hit my dad? I'll chop you to death. The one who ran out of the house, carrying a kitchen knife, was Li Duan, the youngest son born after Chen Dashan's mother remarried Li Xinding. He had always been doted on by Li Xinding and his wife, and at a young age had already become a notorious little tyrant in the village. This brat had disliked Chen Dashan since childhood, always feeling that the family's hard life was all because of the 2 burdens his mother had brought with her back then. The moment he came out, he was like a crazed wolf cub, charging straight at Chen Dashan and raising the kitchen knife high before slashing down viciously. In an instant, terrified cries rang out all around. Even Li Xinding, who was sitting on the ground, was so shocked by his precious son's sudden action that his eyes widened and he was completely dumbfounded. 15-year-old Li Duan, his face full of hostility, rushed straight at Chen Dashan and raised the kitchen knife to chop. In his previous life, Chen Dashan, who had lost his father in childhood, felt it was because of Li Xinding that the three of them, his mother and the two children, had been unable to survive. On top of that, Li Duan was 8 years younger than him, so he had always been endlessly tolerant of this brat. But at this moment, smack, Chen Dashan sent Li Duan sprawling to the ground with a slap, then swiftly brought a foot down and stepped on the hand the brat was holding the kitchen knife with. Oh, only halfway through his wail, Li Duan saw that pitch-black kitchen knife coming straight down toward his head. The wail stopped abruptly, and warmth spread across his lower body. The brat had been scared into wetting himself. Several nearby villagers cried out in alarm and hurried forward to shove Chen Dashan, and with a crack, the kitchen knife chopped into the snow right beside Li Duan's head. Dashan, stop now. Hurry and put the knife down. Have you gone mad? Duan is just a child. Why are you getting into it with him? If that slash had really landed on him, you'd be executed. These people held Chen Dashan down in a flurry, snatching the knife while shouting. Chen Dashan stared murderously at Li Xinding, struggling and panting heavily as he said, "Are you going to explain things clearly? Or are you waiting for me to report it to the public security? Now there's one more person the public security needs to arrest. Everyone here saw it. Your son really was trying to chop me to death just now. Even if he didn't succeed, it's still attempted murder, and he'd still have to be arrested and sent to prison, starting at no less than 10 years. Of course he knew that even if 15-year-old Li Duan were arrested, he would only be sent to a reform school for discipline. But common knowledge that everyone in later generations knew was like an unreadable heavenly book to the villagers before him. How would they know whether Chen Dashan was telling the truth or not? Li Duan, whose mouth was full of filthy language, immediately fell silent again when he heard this. Prison? Starting at 10 years? To mountain folk, how was that any different from the sky falling? Li Xinding too was stunned in place by the sudden ferocity Chen Dashan had erupted with, along with what he had said. At this time, the surrounding villagers also started shouting all at once. Li Xinding, hurry up and explain things clearly. Dashan really has no way out now. His eyes are truly red. If you won't listen to advice, then don't blame us for washing our hands of it and letting you make a scene all the way to the public security. Forced by the adopted son he had raised for more than 10 years to bow his head and admit fault in front of so many people, Li Xinding had lorded it over Chen Dashan for so many years. How could he afford to lose face like this? He was so angry that the veins on his neck bulged, and he immediately shouted stubbornly, "Slander and insult? Attempted murder? You little bastard, you think learning a few new words is enough to scare me? I'm telling you, it won't matter who you bring in. I just heard someone say." He came to his senses. He simply didn't believe that this stepson, who had never even left the mountains, could know anything about the law. Heard someone say? Who did you hear it from? Tell him to come over here and say it in front of all of us. Before Li Xinding could finish speaking, an angry roar came from the distance. Everyone turned to look and saw Li Yukai holding a tobacco pipe in his hand, walking over furiously. When Xiao Zhao was going door to door kowtowing and begging for food, it was broad daylight, and quite a few people saw her. Which of you saw her enter anyone's house? Li Yukai strode up to Li Xinding and waved his pipe as he shouted sternly. Yofu told me himself that you had Dashan marry Xiao Zhao and bring her home, just so you could ask the village for a spot to work at the firecracker factory. The village cadres told him to take care of the disabled and gave the spot to Xiao Zhao, and that bastard you got evil ideas, and drove Dashan and his wife to their deaths. In his previous life, Chen Dashan, as her husband, didn't believe Zhao Huilan either and beat him half to death right away. So Li Yukai waited 2 days, and only when he really couldn't hold it in anymore did he catch him and give him a good scolding. But now, Chen Dashan had made his attitude and determination clear from the very beginning. So Li Yukai, who had been watching from a distance the whole time, immediately stepped forward. Li Youcai's younger brother, Li Youfu, was a production team squad leader. Although he wasn't an official village cadre, he still had the chance to know a lot of inside information. Hearing Li Yukai say this so firmly and decisively, the villagers immediately chimed in agreement. Uncle Yukai is right. Although Xiao Zhao was kowtowing door to door, she really didn't enter anyone's house. I was saying, Dashan can endure hardship and work hard. And he doesn't look bad either. So how could he have married a lame woman? So that's what it was all about. And now, just to get Chunmei an iron rice bowl. He actually even wants Dashan and his wife's lives. Isn't he afraid of being struck by lightning and punished? Li Xinding was breathing heavily, his dark facial muscles twitching. And he grabbed his precious son Li Duan and headed inside. Anyway, I did hear someone say it. So what if I heard wrong? Something like this happened. I'm his father, so am I not even allowed to ask about it? Stop butting in and worrying over nothing here. This is our old Li family's business, and it's not your place as outsiders to point fingers. He knew this dirty water couldn't be splashed onto Zhao Huilan anymore. So he immediately started acting shameless and prepared to slip away. Looking at Li Xinding's back, Chen Dashan said coldly, "If you don't make yourself clear before you leave, I'll go down the mountain and report it to the police right away. You can try it and see whether I'm bluffing or not. You insulted and slandered my wife, and your son tried to kill someone with a knife. All the folks here saw it with their own eyes and can all testify. When the police come, neither of you father and son will get away. You'll both end up in jail." Li Xinding's whole body shook. When he turned around, his face was already twisted with rage. "You lightning-struck little bastard. I raised you for more than 10 years. And this is how you repay me? Huh. Sending your own father and younger brother to jail. Aren't you afraid people will point fingers at you for the rest of your life? You bastard, if you dare report it to the police today, I'll fight you to the death." Chen Dashan looked at the man coldly, his expression not changing in the slightest. "Even if people point fingers at me behind my back, that's still better than not being able to go on living. Oh, and when the police get here, this family will have to divide the property again too. Those bags of corn you hid in the loft above the kitchen, at least 30% of them should go to me. And those grain coupons and money under your bedboards." Large beads of sweat rolled down Li Xinding's forehead, his eyes full of struggle and unwillingness. He looked at the indignant villagers around him, then at the resolute Chen Dashan, and understood in his heart that if this matter wasn't properly settled today, he was afraid he would really be in deep trouble. After hesitating for quite a while, Li Xinding finally gritted his teeth and spoke with extreme reluctance. "Fine. I was wrong. I shouldn't have talked nonsense about your wife. I made it all up." His voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. "Louder. Didn't you eat?" Chen Dashan shouted with a frown. Li Xinding took a deep breath and shouted at the top of his lungs. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have slandered Zhao Huilan. It was all my nonsense." After shouting this, it was as if all his strength had been drained away, and he collapsed onto the steps with a thud. Only then did Chen Dashan let out a cold snort. Turning around, he cupped his fists toward the surrounding villagers and said, "Thank you, uncles, aunties, and grannies, for helping me uphold justice. I, Dashan, will surely repay everyone's kindness in the future." As the villagers nodded one after another, their eyes were also filled with astonishment. They had watched Chen Dashan grow up, and all knew what he used to be like. How had this kid suddenly found the courage to go head-to-head with Li Xinding? Could it be that after being sick once, he had suddenly come to his senses? Zhao Huilan, whose shoulder was once again wrapped in Chen Dashan's arm, was even more completely dumbfounded. Her gaze remained fixed on Chen Dashan's face the whole time. It was clearly the exact same face. But what was different? Zhao Huilan stared at Chen Dashan for a while, then suddenly understood. It was his eyes, the way he looked at her. Gone was the disgust and disdain of the past few days. Instead, they were bright and sparkling, carrying tenderness and pity, as if she were his most cherished treasure. Zhao Huilan was startled by her own thought. Her face reddened slightly, and she quickly lowered her head and said softly, "As long as everything's been made clear, that's enough. Let's hurry inside. The weather is cold outside." Right. Let's get inside quick. It's cold outside." Chen Dashan hurriedly waved goodbye to the gradually dispersing villagers and anxiously helped Zhao Huilan into the thatched hut. After pressing her down onto the bed and covering her with a quilt, he immediately picked up the sickle and rope on the ground again and strode toward the door. "You stay home and get some proper rest. I'm going out to find something to eat." After saying that, he didn't wait for Zhao Huilan to respond before plunging once more into the bitter wind. Looking at the bamboo all over the mountains and fields, bent low under the weight of snow, a trace of determination flashed in Chen Dashan's eyes. Then he raised his hand and grabbed a hoe and strode toward the distant mountains. The socks and liberation shoes Chen Dashan wore were both full of holes, and when he was catching wild chickens on the back hill, quite a bit of snow had gotten into them. His feet had long since been frozen so numb they had almost no feeling left. He ran to a field by the roadside, and pulled off a few dry corn husks to pad the soles of his shoes. Then wrapped several more layers around the outside of the shoes and tied them up tightly with rope. It looked odd, but at least it helped a bit with keeping warm. The mountain ranges around Li Family Village stretched for hundreds of miles, and the mountains were full of all kinds of wild game and mountain produce. The older generation often muttered that in the early years, they had even seen tigers and bears in the old forest. The situation was fairly good a few years ago. The village militia had guns and could still keep things under control. But now the militia has been disbanded and the firearms have been collected, so only a few villagers still have homemade muzzleloaders. Those homemade guns have weak stopping power and poor accuracy. The key is that every time you fire, you have to pour gunpowder back into the barrel, ram it down tight with an iron rod, and finally load iron pellets or iron shavings. If he really ran into a ferocious beast that couldn't be killed with one shot, there would be no chance to fire a second time at all. The snow had risen past Chen Dashan's knees as he trudged unevenly into the mountains. When he reached a bamboo grove from memory, he stopped. Without firearms, making traps had become the only available and most effective way to hunt. Chen Dashan, once a special forces soldier, was highly skilled in wilderness survival, and making traps was second nature to him as well. He picked up the sickle he had borrowed from Liu Kai and quickly chopped down dozens of bamboo stalks. In just a little over half an hour, he had whittled a large bundle of spikes, along with many highly springy bamboo poles and bamboo strips. Only then did he come to the place he had spotted earlier, raised his hoe, and started digging a pit. Two large rocks more than 10 meters long formed a funnel-shaped angle, and the spot Chen Dashan chose was right at the mouth of the funnel. The ground was covered in thick ice, and the soil was full of rocks. Chen Dashan was still extremely weak, and it took him more than an hour to finish digging the trap pit. Panting heavily, he rested briefly, then planted the sharpened bamboo into the bottom of the pit, cut some branches to cover it, and concealed it with dead leaves and snow. Then he also set up several rope snares around it. The traps were ready. Based on Chen Dashan's experience, beasts definitely came and went through this place. But he really couldn't afford to wait. Earlier, when he went to the back mountain to catch wild chickens, he had only gone that short distance before he was so exhausted that his vision went black. If he went hungry for another day, he didn't even know whether he would still have the strength to make it here. Suddenly, Chen Dashan, frowning in thought, noticed a large dense cluster of kudzu vines not far away. Under the kudzu vines were kudzu roots. If dug out and processed into kudzu starch, they could be used to make flatbreads or porridge. But this stuff was far too hard to dig up. The key was that even after a huge amount of effort, there was no guarantee it would make even one full meal. For the current Chen Dashan, using kudzu vines to replace the insufficient rope was actually more useful. The mountains were silent, with only the occasional sound of branches snapping under the weight of snow, unusually clear. Suddenly, from the direction of the mountaintop came a shrill whistle, along with thumping knocking sounds and shouted calls. Countless birds were startled into the sky, and the dense bushes began to shake. As the sounds drew nearer, the commotion in the woods grew greater and greater. All of a sudden, 3 animals covered all over with grayish-black fur, about a foot long and somewhat cat-like in appearance, darted out of a large tree hollow in a panic. Masked palm civets, a whole litter of masked palm civets. Chen Dashan was startled, then instantly thrilled. His luck was incredible. If he could catch these little things, it would solve a huge problem for him. Overjoyed, he ran with all his might while blowing a bamboo whistle, driving those masked palm civets toward the trap. Wild animals have an instinctive sense of danger. Smelling the lingering human scent from the direction of the trap pit, the civets quickly changed direction and turned to run toward the other side. Fortunately, Chen Dashan had prepared for this long ago. He immediately ran to the side, picked up one end of a kudzu vine from the ground, and gave it a hard yank. Right after that, the huge snowball he had previously gone to great trouble to get up into the tree branches, strung there with kudzu vines, then began dropping one after another from all directions. Thud, thud, thud. Snowballs the size of basketballs came crashing down at high speed. They did not have much attacking power, but they sure made a lot of noise. Seeing this, the 3 civets immediately ran to the other side again. But the snowballs Chen Dashan had set up had already surrounded this hillside. As another string of snowballs fell, the 3 civets finally ran toward the pit trap. The 2 large rocks on either side of the trap were over 2 meters high, and steep and slippery as well, so the civets could not climb up them either. The panicked civet family charged forward with no other choice, and in the blink of an eye reached the funnel opening. Swish! The taut sapling suddenly sprang up, and one of the civets was instantly hoisted into midair. The remaining 2 civets leaped up in fright, but when they came down, they happened to fall right into the pit. Each of these things weighed only a dozen or so jin, and their fur was thick, so the bamboo spikes in the pit could not kill them. Chen Dashan practically rolled straight down the hillside. With a fierce yank on the last kudzu vine, more than 10 rocks the size of wash basins that had been piled on the big boulder came clattering down into the pit. Only then did Chen Dashan keep gasping for breath, collapsing weakly into the snow, as if exhausted. Those rocks were the ones he had dug out of the earth earlier when he was digging the pit trap. To move them onto the big rock nearby, he had even rubbed the skin off his hands. Fortunately, all the effort had not been in vain. 3 civets, each weighing a dozen or so jin. This was a genuine bumper harvest. The window of the mud brick house was very small, and even in broad daylight, the inside of the room was extremely dim. The fire pit enclosed with stone slabs was burning fiercely. Smoke swirled through the air, and the flickering firelight illuminated Li Xinding's gloomy expression. The man glared viciously at the honest-looking middle-aged woman cowering in the corner, and even knocked sparks out of the stone ledge with the tobacco pipe in his hand. See that? That's the fine son you gave birth to. All these years he's eaten my food and drunk my drink, if not for me. That little bastard who ought to be struck by lightning would have died who knows where in some desolate wilderness long ago. But look at him now. His wings have hardened, and in front of so many people, he actually dares to go against me. Lu Zhaodi was wearing a blackened coarse cloth, front-opening padded jacket, patched over and over, with greasy stains on the cuffs glistening in the firelight. Faced with Li Xinding's furious cursing, she merely hunched her neck and sat in the corner with downcast eyes and an obedient manner, never saying a word from beginning to end. As the mother of Chen Dashan and Chen Hohat, all these years she had never once defended her own son and daughter in front of Li Xinding. It was always just like today. No matter how big a commotion there was, no matter how badly the sister and brother were beaten, she would hide off to the side like an ostrich, as if by neither listening nor looking, she could pretend that nothing had happened. Dad, don't get worked up either. Li Duan was already 15 years old, yet at this moment he was still leaning against Lu Zhaodi's lap. Young as he was, there was a vicious streak in his bones, and what he said sent chills down people's spines. I heard people say that bastard was just lucky and got 2 pheasants on the back hill with a sieve basket. It's already good enough to run into something like that once. How could it happen every day? I already put away our sieve basket just now, so that bastard definitely won't catch even a single bird, and can only starve to death together with that cripple. Hearing this, Li Xinding immediately broke into a smile. He reached out and affectionately patted Li Duan on the head, saying, "My Duan is the sensible one after all. Your old man has gone muddle-headed. You're right. That little bastard and that cripple will starve to death sooner or later. There's no need to get angry over them. They've managed to get a bite to eat now and have a bit of strength, but once they pass out from hunger, I'll go avenge you right away." A son hitting his father, and daring to lay hands on my Duan too. I absolutely won't spare them. As he was speaking, the people in the room heard the crunching sound of someone stepping on the snow outside the door. Right after that, they heard Chen Dashan's unusually excited voice, coming from the direction of the thatched hut. "Huilan, why did you come out? Haha, come take a look, I caught something good again." The first one who couldn't sit still was Li Duan. The boy sprang impatiently off Lu Zhaodi's lap and dashed outside at full speed. Li Xinding didn't delay either, grabbing his pipe and following him out the door. But when the father and son reached the doorway, they saw nothing at all. In the freezing weather, as soon as Chen Dashan saw Zhao Huilan outside, he quickly stepped forward and gently ushered her back inside with him. Watching the corner of Chen Dashan's clothes disappear through the doorway, Li Xinding spat a thick gob of phlegm viciously in that direction and cursed. "They're so poor they can barely keep the pot boiling. And he's still putting on airs here. That little bastard is only capable of this much. Saying he caught something good again. Who's he trying to fool? With his hands completely empty. If he can get anything good in the mountains, then from now on I'll even read my name backward." Li Duan's eyes darted around, and he lifted his leg, wanting to go over to Chen Dashan's place. Li Xinding grabbed him back in one pull and coaxed him, saying, "Duan, let's go inside. There's nothing to see. They just had a full meal and still have some strength right now, so they might lay hands on you again." As he spoke, he heartfully rubbed the slap mark on Li Duan's face that still hadn't faded, then went on jumping and cursing for quite a while before finally turning and going back inside. Inside the thatched hut, Chen Dashan helped Zhao Huilan sit down on the edge of the bed, and when she saw the 3 massed palm civets draped over his shoulder, She was completely dumbfounded. She was among the last batch of educated youth sent down to the countryside, but she had still spent several years in these mountains. Though she had never seen a masked palm civet with her own eyes, she had heard people talk about them. She had heard that these creatures could run incredibly fast in the forest, jump over 3 feet high, and even climb trees. When Chen Dashan went out, he had only taken a sickle, a hoe, and a length of rope. With just those few tools, catching even one masked palm civet would be a miracle. But he had actually brought back 3 at once? Full of confusion, Zhao Huilan couldn't help asking, "How did you catch them?" "I dug a big pit over by Savage Slope, set up a few snares, then ran to the top of the hillside and shouted for a while. I didn't expect I'd really get some good game." Chen Dashan explained excitedly as he ground that battered kitchen knife on the stone ledge by the fire, then began skinning the masked palm civets. He said it lightly, but when Zhao Huilan heard it, her heart skipped a beat. Savage Slope was an extremely steep hillside several miles away. That place was steep and perilous, overgrown with shrubs, and people said that fierce beasts, and even wild men, appeared there. Even experienced old hunters from the mountains didn't dare go too deep inside. In such bitterly cold weather, Chen Dashan had actually risked so much and gone hunting in that place empty-handed? Zhao Huilan looked at Chen Dashan for a long while. After seeing the injury on his hand, she finally worked up the courage and picked 2 pieces of spider egg sac skin off the wall. Then she stepped forward and said softly, "Your hand is hurt, so why didn't you stop the bleeding first? Don't go to such dangerous places again in the future. In a bit, I'll take this meat to trade with someone for some grain. Once we make it through until spring, life will get easier." In those days, when medicine was scarce, people in the mountains mostly used this kind of spider egg sac, or the fine ash around door hinges, to stop bleeding. As for alcohol disinfection and the like, not to mention they simply didn't understand it at all. Even if they did, they couldn't bear to spend the money. Watching Zhao Huilan carefully apply the spider egg sac skin to the wound on his hand, and hearing her words carry a faint note of reproach, Chen Dashan's eyes were filled with gentle warmth and a smile. Only at this moment did he sense a trace of living vitality from Zhao Huilan. "It's just a small injury, it's nothing serious." Chen Dashan took the opportunity to hold Zhao Huilan's hand and said seriously, "Huilan, I said I'd definitely make sure you have enough to eat, warm clothes to wear, and a good life. When a man says something, he has to make it happen. Don't worry, your man here is very capable. Even a tiger would have to walk around me if it saw me." Hearing the words, "your man," Zhao Huilan's face grew slightly warm, and her heartbeat suddenly quickened a little. Chen Dashan then helped her over to the bedside and sit down, and reminded her, "If you feel cold, wrap yourself in the quilt. Don't worry about trading for grain. After we eat, I'll go into town. This civet cat, both the meat and the hide can be sold for money. And I'm not just going to trade for grain, I'm also going to bring back 2 cotton quilts." Trade for money? Trade for grain? And even bring back 2 cotton quilts? Looking at Chen Dashan as he turned around and busied himself with focus, Zhao Huilan's expression was complicated, and a glimmer of hope gradually lit up in her eyes. Very soon, Chen Dashan butchered 1 civet cat. Then he used the kitchen knife to split off half, chopped it haphazardly into several large pieces, washed them, added water, and tossed them into the hanging pot, which he hung on the hook above the fire. He had just whittled 2 pairs of chopsticks from bamboo when the water in the pot started boiling. Steam billowed, and the aroma of meat filled the thatched hut. The civet cat had white fur on its cheeks and between its brows, so the mountain folk gave it the name White Brow. Mountain folk all said, "Dragon meat in the sky, white brow meat on the ground." Even though there wasn't any seasoning in the pot, the fragrance still made Chen Dashan swallow hard. He quickly added a little coarse salt to the pot, then squatted impatiently by the fire and used the chopsticks he had just whittled to poke at the meat in the pot again and again, as if poking it a few more times would make the meat cook faster. Meanwhile, over in the main house, Li Xinding's family had also started dinner. In these mountains, life was hard, and every household ate only 2 meals a day. Their dinner was nothing more than a few potatoes roasted under the fire, plus a small amount of rice simmered in a clay pot by the side of the fire. The potatoes were for Li Xinding and Lu Zhaodi to eat, while the rice was prepared especially for Li Duan. No rice was grown in these mountains, only corn, sweet potatoes, and potatoes that could withstand the cold and drought. The bit of rice they fed Li Duan had all been traded for by carrying potatoes into town. 6 jean of potatoes could only be exchanged for 1 jean of rice. And it had to be the good potatoes, well-shaped and large, to be exchangeable. To mountain folk, Rice this precious was delicious even without any side dishes. Li Duan, perfectly at ease, cradled the clay pot, picked up his chopsticks, took a bit of chili paste from the bowl on the table and stirred it in, then started eating with great relish. But as he ate, he suddenly stopped. The boy sniffed hard, then swallowed and shouted loudly, "Meat! It's the smell of meat! Dad, Mom, hurry and smell it! Is that the smell of meat?" He threw down the earthen jar in his hand and grabbed Li Xinding, shaking him hard. "Someone's eating meat." "Meat?" Li Xinding, who had been gnawing on potatoes with chili sauce, suddenly froze, greedily sniffing the air as well. Smelling the meaty aroma in the air, the old man even had drool running from the corners of his mouth. Such a strong gamey smell. Is it wild dog meat or hog badger meat? Li Xinding muttered as he tossed aside the potato in his hand, got up, and walked outside. Lu Zhaodi, who usually rarely spoke at home, also opened her mouth at this moment. "Honey, go next door to Brother Yotsai's house and have a look. If they've gotten some wild game, talk to them nicely and borrow some back." As she spoke, she looked at Li Duan with doting eyes. "Our Duan hasn't had any meat for a long time." Right, Dad, I want to eat meat." Li Duan's eyes lit up, and he immediately followed Li Xinding. "I'll go with you." When Li Xinding reached the main room, he thought for a moment, then turned around and took down a bundle of tobacco leaves from the wall, tucking it under his arm, and then clasped his hands inside his sleeves, and went out with Li Duan. Strange. As soon as he stepped outside, Li Xinding turned his head toward the thatched hut. "Why does this smell of meat seem like it's coming from over there? Dad, that bastard Chen Dashan couldn't have really gotten meat, could he?" Li Duan was craving it so badly that before Li Xinding could respond, he excitedly ran toward the thatched hut. "Dad, the smell of meat is coming from the thatched hut." At that moment, Li Xinding's whole face darkened. That little bastard really got hold of meat? Good thing there were no outsiders around just now. Otherwise, wouldn't I have to read my name backward from now on? But the very next second, Li Duan in the distance looked at his father and burst into loud laughter, bending forward and backward. "Dad, you said it yourself just now. If he could get something good, you'd read your name backward from now on." Oh, my dad's changing his name now. From now on he'll be called Ding Xinli. What a truly filial son. Even though Li Xinding usually doted on this boy to no end, at this moment, he wanted nothing more than to give him a beating. Inside the thatched hut, when Chen Dashan heard Li Duan shouting outside, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he casually grabbed that sickle. The next second, the door was being pounded with loud bangs by Li Duan. "Chen Dashan, are you eating meat in there? I can smell it already. Hurry up and get me a few pieces to taste." The boy didn't even wait for Chen Dashan to respond before reaching out and pulling open the wooden plank door. But before he could step inside, a sickle was thrust right at the tip of his nose. Looking at the cold sickle at the tip of his nose, Li Duan's feet froze, and he widened his eyes and started cursing. "Chen Dashan, you damned bastard. I haven't even settled the score with you yet for that slap you gave me this morning. And now you're pointing a sickle at me again? You've really got some nerve." Chen Dashan's gaze was sharp as a blade as he stared coldly at Li Duan and squeezed out a single word through clenched teeth. "Get lost. You heartless, ungrateful bastard. How dare you tell me to get lost?" Li Duan's face was twisted with fury, viciousness spilling out. "I'm your brother, your own brother. Now that you've gotten meat, shouldn't you let Dad, Mom, and me eat first? Are you even human? Chen Dashan, put that knife down right now." Li Xinding cursed along as he followed, while immediately looking toward the hanging pot inside the room. As a native mountain villager, he recognized at a glance that what was cooking in the pot was civet meat. Mast palm civet meat is rich in fat. For mountain folk who rarely see any meat all year round, the temptation is simply too great. Li Fugaway from the village militia squad had once eaten mast palm civet with the team in his early years. Just those few small pieces of meat and a mouthful of soup had him talking about it for years, dreaming of having another bite. At this moment, Li Xinding was also swallowing hard. When he saw that there were still 2 mast palm civets lying in the thatched hut, the greed in his eyes almost became tangible. "You little bastard, no matter what, Duan is still your younger brother. And you actually won't even let him eat a few pieces of meat? And even though the family has split up, you're still my son. I raised you to this age, and this is how you keep all the food to yourself?" Chen Dashan narrowed his eyes and directly swung up the sickle to chop. "Oh my God!" Li Duan let out a terrified scream and instinctively shrank backward. His retreat knocked Li Xinding behind him off balance as well, and the two of them tumbled down the steps together in a sorry heap. Bang! The sickle in Chen Dashan's hand slammed fiercely into the wooden door. the blade sinking deeply into the wooden door, nearly chopping through the door panel, with wood chips flying everywhere. Li Xinding stared at the trembling sickle in the door, feeling a chill shoot straight to his scalp, his whole body turning cold. This little beast really dared to chop. If Duan hadn't dodged so quickly just now, half his head would probably have been chopped off. If you dare come any closer, I'll hack you to death. Chen Dashan spat on the ground, yanked the sickle from the door with 2 jerks, and looked coldly at Li Xinding as he said, "You say you raised me? At 5 years old, I was already standing on a stool at the stove cooking for the whole family, and my sister was driven out to the fields at 7 to earn work points. All these years in your house, what mouthful of food did I ever eat for free? Since our teens, on what day did my sister and I earn fewer work points than you? Who exactly was raising whom? I'd say you've been sucking the blood of me and my sister all these years." In his previous life, Chen Dashan had always kept in mind his mother's kindness in raising him, and also felt that, at the very least, Li Xinding had provided him and Chen Hohat, who had lost their father in childhood, a place to stay. So while in the army, he sent his allowance back home and even instructed Li Xinding in a note to distribute it reasonably. At that time, having seen the vast world outside, he naively believed that those trivial conflicts in the countryside were merely caused by poverty. He thought that as long as life improved, Li Xinding would stop being so calculating, and his mother would no longer remain so weak. It was only when he returned again that he learned Zhao Huilan had not received a single cent of those allowances. After the household responsibility system was implemented, life had clearly improved, and there was also the allowance he sent back regularly. Only then did Chen Dashan realize that some people are simply born rotten. Given a second life, he would be fiercer and more ruthless than them, so that they would never dare provoke him again. Chen Dashan's words made Li Xinding's face turn alternating shades of green and red, yet he still shamelessly shouted at the doorway. "Fine, you ungrateful, white-eyed wolf. You can ignore whether I, your stepfather, live or die, and I don't care to eat your bit of meat either. But don't forget, your birth mother is still here, and Chunmei and Duan are also your biological younger sister and younger brother. You unfilial beast, you're eating meat yourself while making your mother and younger siblings gnaw on potatoes. Do you have any conscience at all? After your father died back then, your mother took you 2 siblings. Enough." Chen Dashan let out a furious roar, cutting off Li Xinding's words, his eyes seeming to spit fire. "Stop using my mother as an excuse. Li Chunmei and Li Duan. Over the years, they never treated me like an older brother either." At that moment, Lu Zhaodi also walked out of the house. She lowered her head, nervously rubbing the corner of her clothes with both hands, and murmured, "Dashan, don't be angry with your father anymore. We're all family. What is there that can't be talked over properly?" This was the first time Chen Dashan had seen his mother since being reborn. Even though he was already utterly disappointed in this person, his eyes still couldn't help but redden slightly. He took a deep breath before forcing a bitter smile and saying, "Mom, if it weren't for letting your precious son Li Duan eat meat, even if Li Xinding beat me to death right now, you probably still wouldn't come out and say a word, would you? Stop putting on an act in front of me." His tone gradually turned cold. "I once heard people outside the mountains say something. So long as I have no morals, then no one can morally blackmail me. Don't talk to me about filial piety or not. This meat is what I risked my life to get from the mountains. None of you should even think about laying a hand on it." When Li Duan saw that Lu Zhaodi had stepped in, and Chen Dashan still refused to give in, his face immediately filled with resentment as he climbed up from the ground, ready to keep cursing. Li Xinding's eyes shifted, and he reached out and grabbed the boy, then hypocritically softened his tone and said, "Dashan, Dad knows that I wronged you before. But wasn't that all because life was too poor, and there was simply no way to take proper care of the whole family? Now that you're capable, even if you won't care about me, your stepfather, you should at least care about your mother and look after your younger brother and sister, right? 3 bamboo rats. Just give one. No, half of one." Chen Dashan took another deep breath and coldly swept his gaze over the family of 3 before him. Then he said, word by word, "I don't have a mother who can watch me being bullied with her own eyes and not even dare say a word. Nor do I have younger siblings who, from childhood to adulthood, never treated me as family and would beat and curse me at the slightest thing." As he finished speaking, his eyes were already filled with chill, and he also brandished the sickle in his hand. Seeing this, Li Xinding felt a jolt of fear inside and knew that no matter what, they weren't getting any of that meat today. He shot Chen Dashan a vicious look and roared through gritted teeth, "Fine. You unfilial brat damned to be struck by lightning. You've got guts. Just you wait." After saying that, he directly yanked up Li Duan, who was rolling on the ground and throwing a tantrum, then viciously kicked Lu Xiaodi, and, furious and frustrated, took them back into the house in a dejected manner. Bang! Chen Dashan shut the door without hesitation. At this moment, the bamboo rat meat in the pot was already giving off an enticing aroma. Without even a bowl to eat from, Chen Dashan directly speared the biggest piece with his chopsticks and held it out to Zhao Huilan. Huilan, hurry and eat. Zhao Huilan reached out to take the chopsticks, her tone full of worry. Dashan, you can ignore other people, but your own mother. Chen Dashan gently patted the back of her hand, forcing a bitter smile onto his face. Only when parents are kind can children be filial. Having ended up with a mother who is both weak and biased to the core, the only thing I, as her son, can do is draw a clear line between myself and them. Of course, I am still a human being after all, not a beast. If my mother really faces some hurdle she can't get past in the future, I'll still lend a hand within my ability. At this point, his gaze turned slightly cold, and his tone grew a bit heavier. But only for my mother. As for Li Xinding and his 2 children, even if they die, I won't spare them a second glance. Hearing this, Zhao Huilan gave Chen Dashan a deep look, then lowered her head and took a bite of the meat on the chopsticks. In that instant, a faint smile, almost imperceptible, quietly crept onto the corners of her lips. He really has changed. Although I was forced by circumstances to marry him back then. Looking at it now, it really does seem like heaven has opened its eyes. I didn't marry the wrong man. Civet meat is actually a bit fatty and greasy, and with such crude cooking, the taste really wasn't all that good. But Chen Dashan and Zhao Huilan had gone far too long without eating any meat. After one bite, even with the fat oozing out, they didn't find it greasy at all. Instead, it felt richly savory in their mouths, as if they wanted to swallow their tongues. Having been a soldier, Chen Dashan had never had much table manners to begin with. Even in his previous life, after becoming a big boss, he was still the same, drinking heavily and eating meat in big bites, very uninhibited. At this moment, Zhao Huilan gradually also let go of her restraint in front of him. Starving as she was, as she ate, she set the bothersome chopsticks aside, like a little hamster, held that piece of meat in both hands, and started gnawing on it in big bites. After wolfing everything down, both of them had faces full of grease. Suddenly, as if they could read each other's minds, they looked at each other at the same time. Then, this young couple, who had finally managed to eat a full meal, couldn't help but burst out laughing at each other's bedraggled appearance. By this time, it was probably already 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Chen Dashan suddenly remembered that places like the supply and marketing cooperative and the foreign trade station in town would close when the time came. He hurriedly finished the meat in his hand in a few bites, then picked up the 2 remaining civets and rushed out the door. No matter what, he had to buy the quilt before dark. Although Zhao Huilan wasn't showing any signs of getting sick yet, if she had to endure another freezing night, there was no telling. The path from the village to the town was a full 12+ kilometers long. That path wound tortuously through dense woods, with steep slopes, and several stretches had even been carved out of the mountain rock. A few years earlier, the brigade had taken the lead in organizing the production teams to work together to build a dirt road. But in order to take into account all the production teams along the way, and to avoid the farmland, and go around mountain rock that was hard to blast through, it ended up being built with twists and turns all over the place. If you followed the road to town, you might not even get there after walking all day. But for Chen Dashan, the thick snow instead became a help. He used hemp rope to firmly tie the 2 civets to his back, and also put the skinned-off civet hide under his, but as a cushion. Except for the parts where he absolutely had to walk, on the rest of the route he sat in the snow and slid all the way downhill. A journey that would take others 2 hours to finish. He completed in less than an hour. The national highway passing through the town had already been open to traffic for over a year. Quite a few crude signboards had been put up along the street, and quite a few small restaurants had opened. But at present, they only made whatever they could, providing simple meals for those long-haul truck drivers passing by. Standing by the roadside were tightly packed wooden utility poles, with the wires hanging low and swaying back and forth in the cold wind. There were very few pedestrians on the street, and the clothes people wore were mostly dull colors like blue, black, and gray. The only thing that could still be called lively was a few little brats setting off firecrackers. They laughed and played noisily, their little bare bottoms sticking out of their split-crotch pants frozen bluish-purple, yet they still played with great delight, completely oblivious to the cold. Chen Dashan had no time to appreciate the scenery, let alone indulge in nostalgia. Going down the mountain, he could slide all the way. Going back up, however, he could only climb using both hands and feet. If he waited until dark, when the mountain path would be hard to make out, and with wild beasts roaming in the mountains besides, even he couldn't guarantee nothing would happen. The street wasn't long, and with hurried steps, he quickly arrived at the foreign trade station. In this era, when mountain people sold things like local specialty farm products, livestock products, and handicrafts, they would bring them directly here. The foreign trade station was a single-story red brick building, its outer cement coating mottled and weathered by the years. A sign hung beside the door, with a neat line of large black characters on it. Danshui Town Foreign Trade Station. Chen Dashan looked around at the entrance and found the inside empty. He walked through the burlap sacks in the hall that gave off waves of medicinal fragrance and went to search the lounge at the very back. Still no one to be found. The wall clock showed that it was already nearly 5 in the afternoon. Chen Dashan had originally planned to go straight to the supply and marketing cooperative instead, but after reaching the door, he still shouted toward the surroundings. "Is anyone there? I'm selling something." He didn't call out anyone from the foreign trade station. Instead, he drew out a middle-aged man from the small restaurant next door. The man wore a felt hat on his head, a military overcoat wrapped around his body, and a pair of black high-top canvas cotton shoes rarely seen in the mountains. When he saw the 2 masked palm civets on Chen Dashan and the masked palm civet skin in his hand, the man's eyes immediately lit up. "Little brother, come here, let's have a chat." Chen Dashan originally had no intention of paying attention to him, but when he saw the Defying brand large truck parked at the restaurant entrance, something suddenly stirred in his heart, and he stepped over. The middle-aged man grabbed him and pulled him into the room, saying bluntly, "Little brother, I want all of this game of yours. Name your price." Chen Dashan's gaze flickered slightly, and he carefully thought it over with a hint of caution. The economic policies of this era had already begun to loosen. Although large-scale private business had not yet been permitted, small shops had already opened up in many big cities. Thinking of this, he steadied himself and immediately asked without betraying any emotion, "What do you want this for? And what price can you offer?" The middle-aged man stared fixedly at the masked palm civets on him, boldly pulled out 2 great unity notes from his pocket, and slapped them down in front of Chen Dashan. "I already asked around just now. Pork on ration coupons here is 0.75 yuan per jean. These 2 masked palm civets together should weigh a little over 20 jean. Selling them to me for 20 yuan definitely won't be a loss for you. I'm spending this much money to buy your stuff, so just throw in this hide for me to take back and make a hat or gloves or something." Hearing this, Chen Dashan immediately laughed. "Big brother, that's a bit unfair of you. If you're sincerely buying, then it's 5 yuan per jean, and this hide counts as 8 yuan. The middle-aged man stared at the 5 fingers Chen Dashan held out, his Adam's apple bobbing twice. 5 yuan? At that price you could buy 7 jean of pork. Chen Dashan calmly pushed the masked palm civets on him a little behind his back. "Big brother, you drive long distances and have seen a lot, so you surely know the wild game market in Guang Province's Qingping market better than I do. Just last month a driver told me that restaurants over there were already buying masked palm civets for 8 yuan per jean." He deliberately enunciated the words 8 yuan clearly, his gaze sweeping over the brass buttons on the other man's military overcoat. That was genuine military issue, completely different from the imitations sold at the town supply and marketing cooperative. The middle-aged man gave Chen Dashan a long look, then suddenly chuckled. He pulled a crumpled cigarette pack from his trouser pocket and flicked out 2 big rooster cigarettes, put one in his own mouth, and handed the other to Chen Dashan. "I was originally trying to get a little bargain, but I didn't expect to run into someone who knows the trade. You've had a laugh at my expense. All right, we'll go with what you said, little brother. 5 yuan it is." Only then did he realize that the young man before him was completely different from the mountain folk he had dealt with before. Though dressed in rags, he didn't show the slightest timidity or servility. You had to know that in this era, being a driver was a very prestigious profession, and as someone from the city, he also had a strong sense of superiority in front of mountain people. But Chen Dashan had remained calm and composed the whole time. He even carried the poised and dignified air that only important figures have. Strange. How could someone like this be stuck in such a remote and impoverished place? Could he be an educated youth who was stranded here and never returned to the city? The driver's surname was Luo, and his name was Luo Hongjun. He was a regular at this small eatery, and every time he passed through Danshui town, he would hang around near the foreign trade station looking for bargains. Seeing that the two had struck a deal, The restaurant owner immediately and skillfully picked up a steelyard and handed it over. 22 Jin and 8 Liang. Let's round it up and count it as 23 Jin. Luo Hongjun generously gave Chen Dashan an extra 2 Liang on the scale. Then he unfastened his belt, took money out of the zippered pocket on his underwear, counted out a stack, and handed it to Chen Dashan, including the pelt money. That comes to 123 yuan in total. Little brother, check it. 123 yuan. A thick stack of great unity notes. Although the foreign trade station also bought civets, it only paid 3 yuan per Jin and 4.85 yuan per pelt. This chance encounter with Luo Hongjun let Chen Dashan sell what he had on hand for a full 53.75 yuan more. In these mountains, more than 50 yuan was already a huge sum of money. Pork was 0.75 yuan per Jin, rice 0.35 yuan per Jin, corn only 0.09 yuan per Jin, and matches only 0.02 yuan per box. Luo Hongjun soon squatted beside the truck to inspect the snow chains, preparing to set off overnight. Chen Dashan waved goodbye to him, and, with the cash tucked away, quickly headed toward the supply and marketing cooperative. On the red brick wall in the distance, the slogan "Develop the economy, ensure supply" had already been more than half eroded and covered by ice and snow. In the alley beside the supply and marketing cooperative, 3 men in dogskin hats were squatting by the corner. One of them had his trouser legs tied up with straw rope and was drawing something in the snow with a tree branch. Need ration coupons? When the man looked up, Chen Dashan caught a strong smell of home-cured tobacco. As he nodded, he also caught sight of the red fleece-lined long underwear showing from the cuff of the man's padded jacket. In the mountains, that was a rare item. Only workers at the state-owned factories in the county town could get it allotted. He nodded. Do you have cloth coupons and cotton coupons? Although many things were now available without restriction, some scarce goods still had to be bought with coupons. The man in the dogskin hat held out 3 fingers, red from the cold, with black grime embedded under the nails. Cloth coupons are 0.30 yuan per chi. Cotton coupons 0.50 yuan per Jin. The joy of his harvest in Chen Dashan's heart was immediately washed away by half. The cooperative's cotton was 3.86 yuan per Jin, and adding the cost of the cotton coupons made it 4.36 yuan per Jin. To make a double quilt, you'd need at least 6 Jin of cotton. 1 for the mattress and 1 for the cover. Just the cotton alone would cost more than 50 yuan. And on top of that, he would still have to spend money on sheets and quilt covers. Chen Dashan fell silent for only a moment before pulling 2 great unity notes from his coat. I want 20 chi of cloth coupons, 12 Jin of cotton coupons, 10 Jin of grain coupons, 3 Jin of meat coupons. The brand new great unity notes gleamed with a bluish tint in the snow. The man in the dogskin hat sprang to his feet at once, even dropping the enamel mug he had been holding inside his coat, knocking off some of the red paint on the award character. The transaction was completed in silence. As the national highway opened to traffic, the variety of goods in the supply and marketing cooperative also became much richer. Fruit candies at 0.01 yuan each, Little Dragon Man milk candies at 0.02 yuan each. Friendship cold cream, Peichalin, Shanghai brand face powder. There were even those bright red little silk scarves, though they were a bit expensive at 3 yuan each. The clerk in the cotton and linen section was a young married woman in her 20s. She wore a deep blue Zhongshan-style uniform, seemed to have a bit of lipstick on, and stood behind the counter with her chest proudly thrust out. She glanced at Chen Dashan and asked lazily, "What do you want to buy?" In those days, her attitude was already considered quite good, mainly because Chen Dashan was tall and slender, and indeed good-looking, making people instinctively feel favorably toward him. If it had been someone else dressed like this, she probably wouldn't even have bothered to ask. After all, the things at her counter were not cheap, and not something ordinary people could afford. Chen Dashan smiled politely. "Do you still have double-sized cotton quilts?" The young woman's ears reddened slightly, and she quickly turned her head aside and pointed behind her. "This kind?" Chen Dashan nodded. "Yes, please let me take a look." As the two were talking, 2 young girls not far away who were looking at face powder arm in arm suddenly turned to look over. One of them had a high ponytail. A girl of about 16 or 17 staring at Chen Dashan, her eyes widening in shock. Why was he here? Li Chunmei was extremely surprised. Last night, when she heard Li Xinding say he wanted her to work at the firecracker factory, she was so excited that she barely slept all night and got up early to come down the mountain to town. She eagerly ran off to visit her future workplace, then spent quite a while showing off in front of several of her middle school classmates in town, feeling proud all day long. But now, Chen Dashan, whom she had thought was as good as dead, was standing right in front of her, alive and well. And what Chen Dashan had just said left Li Chunmei utterly dumbfounded. Buy cotton quilts? How could he possibly have money to buy cotton quilts? And he even wanted to buy a double-sized one? Lu Ernie, who was linking arms with Li Chunmei, curiously followed her gaze and glanced over. Chunmei, what's wrong with you? Why do you look so awful? That's Chen Dashan. Li Chunmei's eyes flickered as she gritted her teeth and said, the position at the firecracker factory was obviously meant for me by the village. But he insisted my father give it to his lame wife, and he angered my father so much that he threw him out of the house. And now he's even come specially to block me here on the street. Lu Ernie frowned and subconsciously said softly, don't jump to conclusions. Maybe he's just here to buy something. Buy something. Li Chunmei's voice rose 2 notches. That's a double-sized cotton quilt costing 20 or 30 yuan each. How could someone who can't even afford food possibly buy that? The more Li Chunmei spoke, the more irritated she became. The only road to the firecracker factory ran right past the supply and marketing cooperative. Chen Dashan had come here definitely not to buy anything. He must have come to block me, maybe even to go make trouble at the factory. My father raised you from the age of 3 to your 20s and even helped you get a wife, yet you won't even give me a job quota? At that moment, Chen Dashan was gently rubbing the cotton quilt in front of him. It was very thick and very warm. The stitching on it was also tight and sturdy. Chen Dashan was extremely satisfied. How much is one? The sales clerk glanced at him and said flatly, this was shipped from Jingcheng, made with a full 6 jean of top-quality new cotton. The cotton costs 3.86 yuan per jean, and the processing fee is 0.5 yuan, for a total of 23.66 yuan, plus 6 jean of cotton coupons. Chen Dashan nodded. In those days, a substitute teacher at the town middle school only earned about 17.5 yuan a month. Spending 1.5 months' wages on a cotton quilt was definitely a luxury purchase. But Chen Dashan was willing. He made money precisely to let Zhao Huilan live a good life. Not to mention just a little over 23 yuan. Even if the price were doubled, he'd still be willing to buy it. Give me the other one as well, and also get me a quilt cover and a bed sheet. I also want 2 sets of long underwear, 1 men's and 1 women's, and also a small-size cotton vest. The sales clerk's eyes widened.